Good morning and welcome to Rose Red Homestead, and today we're going to be doing the last of our sprouted flour videos. I saved einkorn for last because I'm most worried about it. And the reason that I'm worried about it is that as many of you know, einkorn does not have a whole lot of gluten, which is exactly why a lot of people like to do baking with it, because they may have some degree of gluten intolerance, but they can tolerate flour like einkorn. And when I have used einkorn flour, I've always used it half and half with white flour so that I get more gluten in there so that I can get a good rise. Today, I'm not going to add any white flour because I've had requests to do just the plain flour, and I get why people want to see that. But I'm a little bit worried that we're not going to get a very good rise. And I'll tell you, sometimes I just think we are so blessed. We have such a wonderful community. And this morning, as I was going through emails and sort of getting prepared for doing this video, I found an email from one of our subscribers whose name is Karen P. And she sent me what is called an Einkorn conversion sheet. It's a cheat sheet. And I've already uploaded it. It is live now up on our recipe section. If you go to our website, click on recipes at the top menu, and then the first section of recipes, this right now is the last one. And this person, Karen, has shared with us this document from someone else's website. The person's name is Victoria, and so I downloaded that, and it's right here. Here's Victoria, and she talks a lot about einkorn flour, and she has developed over the years a little cheat sheet that if you're going to be doing this with einkorn flour, here's some adjustments that you can make, and she has 4 segments for that. I was delighted with this. And so this is going to make our recipe just a tiny tad different. The recipe that we're going to use is the one that I have always used with our sprouted flour efforts. It is Peter Reinhardt's recipe, and it is the one that I used for sprouting wheat for flour and bread, this class right here. Here's a list of all of our classes. And I adjusted that recipe to make it half and half. Half sprouted flour with half white flour, but not today. Today I'm using that recipe, but I'm using all 4 cups einkorn flour. So here is the einkorn wheat that we sprouted and then dried in our dehydrator. It's about 3 cups. The recipe calls for 4 cups of flour, which this should make about 4 cups. So I'm going to go ahead and put all of it in, and we're going to turn it on and let it run. So this just finished. It's beautiful, fine flour. I love how this grain mill does for us. So let's see if we're going to have 4 cups. I think we will have it easily. I may even have a little bit left over. We'll see. So here's 1. 2. 3.
'Looks like you may have a smidge left over.
I think I'll have a little smidge. Too much to add to this bread dough, but I will make pancakes or something and add that in. And there's 4. This much left. We'll save it for another use, set it aside. And Peter's recipe calls for a teaspoon and a half of yeast. And I keep my yeast in the freezer. I'm going to put that back in the freezer. And it calls for 1 teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of ghee, And I'm just going to stir this up a little bit, kind of mix those dry ingredients before I drop the ghee in. And according to the Einkorn conversion cheat sheet, if recipe is whole wheat and you're using whole wheat, does the recipe contain yeast or sourdough? Yes. So we go to the yes, and it says, reduce the amount of liquid by 20% and add 1/4 teaspoon of powdered ginger to the yeast mix. So I'm going to use 1/4 of a teaspoon of ginger. And she says that the ginger does not add to the taste of the flour, but it does help with the rise and make the bread so that it is not so dense. So I'm anxious to try this. I'm actually quite excited to try this. So mixing it all up together, and Peter's recipe calls for a cup of water plus up to a 1/2 cup additional water. And according to what our cheat sheet says, we want to reduce the water just a little bit, which means she's suggesting that we need to have a little bit of a drier dough. So we still need to make the dough so it is pliable enough to do what we need for it to do. So let's see what this does.
Looks like you're going to need more.
I am. All of the wheats are not the same in terms of their ability to soak up liquid. So we're going to play this by ear and just use our good judgment. So I have a little more water. I'll make this just a bit drier than I've made our other sprouted grains, but it still has to be enough that we can work with it. And I think we just did it. I probably added a couple of tablespoons, maybe 3 tablespoons of additional. We do our caterpillar mix. So there's our caterpillar, and fold it. And here's our second caterpillar, fold it. Third, and fold, and fourth. Okay, now we can turn it out. And we do our first stretch and fold. Now this is sticking to my fingers. Einkorn is a little bit more sticky than some of the other wheats are. So to do this stretch and fold, you'll find the method explained in detail on sprouting wheat for flour and bread. I call this my stretch and fold method. It's not mine. I borrowed it from the person that I really appreciate his work with artisan breads. So if we make this north, east, south, west, we take north and stretch it and fold it. And then we turn it to the east, stretch and fold. And to the south, stretch and fold. And to the west, stretch and fold. And then, very sticky dough. So this is now our first stretch and fold. We do the northeast southwest thing, and then we let it sit for 15 minutes, and that is one stretch and fold. We do 4 of them. So I'm going to rinse my hand, and I'm going to put the magnets on the top that will help us keep track of where we are, and we will be back in about 15 minutes for the next stretch and fold. We've just completed stretch and fold number 1. So let's check to see how it's doing. I'm going to wet my hands. Okay, and all we're going to do this time is just the stretch and fold. Now, it's sticking together because it's sticky and not because it's getting elastic, as near as I can tell. Yeah, it's breaking apart. So there's north. See how it's breaking apart? East, south, and west. Okay, This is very sticky dough. That's einkorn. Okay, back in 15. Second stretch and fold finished. And here we go. We're battling the sun over here. Now, this is still very sticky, and because Victoria, on her cheat sheet that Karen gave us a copy of, what she says is the dough needs to be a little bit drier. So I am going to add just a little bit of flour. The yeast is working. I can see the little cells, but I'm not seeing a lot of elasticity that I like to see yet. We'll see. So, north, whoop, it just came right apart. East, south, west. You know what? I am thinking we're not going to do this 4 times. I think probably
Why not?
because the gluten does not need that much development because there's not that much of it. My wheels are turning. So I think I'm going to shape it right now and we're going to see what happens. So I have my pan ready. We're fighting the sun over here. So I'm just going to knock it down and roll it up like I always do. It does not have the elasticity, so I don't think this stretch and fold is doing this dough much good. We just need for it to rise and get on with it. Okay, this is a risk I'm taking. Okay, we're going to let this rise and see what happens. Okay, we'll be back when it's time to put it in the oven, so keep your fingers crossed that we'll get a good rise. This is as much of a rise as we're going to get out of this. So it's about a 1/2 inch crowned above the edge of the pan. So we're going to go ahead and put it in a 350 oven and bake it probably for about 25 minutes and we'll see what we come up with. I'm actually pleased with this rise, even though it's not way tall like some of our breads. This is pretty darn good for einkorn. Well, we just took it out of the oven. It reached temperature 190 degrees. It is pretty flat, but that's about what einkorn does anyway. It came up about this much from when we first put the dough in the pan, and then it stayed at about that same level. So we're going to let this cool for a little bit, and then we will cut into it and see what we've got. All right, let's cut into this and just see. Well, look at that. Not too bad.
So it looks like einkorn just as a flat, dense bread.
Yeah, it is actually. And it might be a little soggy there.
Doesn't look like it.
No,
Apparently it feels that way to you.
well, it's done pretty well. And this, of course, is a sprouted flour, and we already know that sprouted flours, in the process of sprouting, diminishes the gluten quite a bit. And so we have a wheat that doesn't have very much gluten to begin with, and then we reduce that by sprouting it. So I think that if I were going to use einkorn as flour for bread, I would not sprout it. I've been successful in getting a higher rise with einkorn, probably even with this same recipe. It would work just fine, except not using sprouted bread. I do believe that the ginger did help it rise a little bit. I was afraid we were going to have quite a thin brick by the time we were finished because this was sprouted bread. but I'm going to just take a little taste and see how it is. And this 100% grain is always really nutritious, and I like it a lot. It's good. And if I were to use this in Jim's and my family, I wouldn't use 100% einkorn anyway. I would use either half and half, regular, not sprouted, with white flour, or if I wanted a whole grain, I would use half einkorn flour and half white winter wheat flour. The white winter wheat is as close to a regular white all-purpose flour as I've been able to find, and it has lots of good gluten in it to help the einkorn rise. It would be appropriate to do that if you do not have a gluten intolerance of any kind. So we've had some really good experiments with this sprouted flour. It's been fun for us, and we have leftover grains from all of the flours that we have tried, so we'll be working those regular flours into our bread going forward, so none of those wheat grains are going to go to waste. So thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate you all so very much. We have the best community, and we'll see you very soon for more videos.